Today, we're going to talk about the fact that sports card channels are dying on YouTube. Professor Sports Cards, aka Jason, put out a video in the last 24 hours. And I want to sort of piggyback off the back of it because we have in fact talked about this exact thing quite a lot over the last 12 months. But I want to piggyback off the back of him to try and link you guys to my theory as to why I talked about this in the first place, right? I think there's a lot of artificial liquidity that exists within this space, and the dip that we've sort of seen in sports card channels is tying into that, which has made me a little bit nervous. And that is why I want to talk about it. Now, if you're not sure who Jason is, he is Professor Sports Cards, which is what you're sort of seeing on screen right now, which I'd be shocked about because his channel has been pumping the last month or so. And he's sort of the exception to the rule of channels actually dying because he's getting pumped at the moment. But he raised some very good points today. He talked about the fact that sports card channels are tanking. He did some comparisons back to the last 12, 24, 36 months and how no one is really highlighting it. And he showed some channels. And I'm not going to go into his talking points here because I encourage you guys to go ahead and watch it for yourself. I don't want to repeat the things that he's saying, but fundamentally, he went ahead and highlighted a number of creators, compared views to today versus back then, as well as a number of subscribers that they have. And what's painfully obvious with this is the fact that we're seeing, a lot less views than we were, 2, 3, 4 years ago. Now, on face value, that makes a whole lot of sense, right? Because these channels basically blew up during the boom when there was so many more participants within this space. But you would expect that with subscription growth consistently over the last couple of years, that views would be doing a lot better than what they were. And what the last 12 months has shown is not that. And obviously, there's a lot of tools you can use if you're not aware to actually see this for yourself, like Social Blade, which I'll bring up on screen right now. I didn't have it ready. And you can sort of come in here and type the channel's name and you'll see the results and see the trends in terms of views and things like that. And what this has shown, I'm not going to go into detail now, but what this has shown for the last 12 months is that the growth is not the same. And that's to be expected. But what I sort of talked about over the last 12 months is sort of how this ties into what we're seeing out at shows, right? We've talked about the dip in PSA grading numbers. We've talked about this shift towards Pokemon. You go to shows and it's like 90% Pokemon, even sports card shows, which is crazy to sort of see here in Australia. I'm not sure if it's like that in the US, but I'm getting conversations from people that are telling me it's almost the same thing. So the fact that you've got all these things happening and then at the same time channel growth isn't there, it sort of made me sit back and think, okay, well, where are all these people gone? And if all these people are in fact gone, they're no longer watching things, they're no longer going to shows, they're no longer grading sports cards, where is their money gone? And the fact that their money has now gone, what does that mean for the long-term health of this industry? My line of thinking was that you've basically got an industry now through breaking and repacks, etc., that is sort of built on the foundations of being able to sell things quickly, right? You've had all these stories over the last 2 years of people going to shows and repackers are happy to pay 90% comms, right? And they're happy to buy out tables, this and that. So the fact that you've lost this demand, right? Because you've got less people watching, less people grading, less people, participating in sports cards. What does that mean? Because if they're left and repackers now don't buy as much because they don't have the inventory, they don't have the demand coming in anymore, what is that going to do long term? And I sort of quoted that as being artificial liquidity, right? The repackers and breakers being artificial liquidity, right? They've built this foundation off the fact that so many people are paying money hand over fist to participate, and now those people are gone. So then what happens, right? The demand is down, and maybe I'm being too facetious with this, too doom and gloom, but my mind shifted to people going to shows, people going ahead and spending cards with the thought in the back of their mind, well, a repacker is going to come in and clear my table and pay 90% comps. If that disappears, what's the domino effect going to be? Like, are we going to see flow on to the point where, prices drop considerably? And obviously I'm talking very high level here, but that's where my mind goes. And that's where I sort of tied in, the fact that these channels are dipping, because I sort of saw it as the same lack of appetite from people to participate. And again, maybe I'm using a lot of dumb words here, but that's sort of how my mind is sort of assessing the situation. If I'm a collector out there and I've bought, a Kobe Bryant card. I didn't buy this. I've owned it since. I broke it in 2013. But if I went ahead and paid $1,000 for this, it's not worth it. But let's say I paid $1,000 and I was happy to pay $1,000 for this because I knew I could sell it quickly if I needed to. That money isn't there anymore. Like, what's going to happen to this value, right? It's going to go down, or I'm not going to sell them. What am I going to do if I'm, too leveraged with debt? And when you sort of look at this industry and you go to these blow up forums and you go to Reddit and you're seeing the amount of money people are spending, it's like, crap, guys. You're sort of living by paycheck here. And if that money disappears, that gravy train disappears, what's going to happen? And, I want to know your thoughts on this one down below. Like, maybe I'm being too doom and gloom and maybe I've simplified it. I've oversimplified it. But that's what I think about when I see these dip in views, when I see these dip in shows, when I see these dip in PSA grading numbers, when I see SGC basically being killed off, when I see Beckett on its last legs. It's like all these things are sort of disappearing, and there's such a focal point now for repacks and the stuff with GameStop and PSA. It just makes me very uneasy for the long-term health of this industry. It's very much focused on the quick win, right? And the dopamine hit. And we've talked about this a lot over the last couple of years, but that's where my mind goes. Now, we sort of started this off wanting to talk about what Professor Sports Cards talked about, and that was the fact that you've got, content creators essentially having channel views dip. And he called out a few. There's someone here like Jeff Wilson, right? If you look at their most popular videos, they're all from years ago. Like some are from recent periods, like 1 year ago, but fundamentally, these are all from the boom of the industry. I'm sure it's gonna be the same thing for Card Collector too. One from 1 year ago, but his biggest videos are from years and years ago, and he's now almost got 200,000 subscribers. Jeff Wilson has, almost 400,000. I think this just reiterates sort of the lack of people that we have within this niche, and we know social media is a niche within a niche, but we've sort of talked about this for a long time. There's a lot of people that are really struggling, and you've got people like Mojo Sports now pivoting to want to create his own store, because clearly he's tried to come up and be a social media influencer, and he's sort of made that his thing. And for the last couple of years, he's traveled the country and traveled the world. He's gone to the UK, etc. And he's done all these things because he could rely on these views coming in. Now they've stopped. And when they've stopped, what has he done? He said, I need to think of something different. I'm going to go ahead and create a card store, which is a crazy and dangerous thing to be doing in 2025, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Card Collector 2 went ahead and made a podcast to try and have an additional side hustle going on his side hustle of the content creation, because there was a need to do that. Obviously, it's a passion project for him, but there's a reason why he's gone ahead and done that. You've got people like Roth Cards, who very clearly gets good views these days, but his channel blew up to 100,000 subscribers. But his oldest videos are again the ones that are getting the most views, and some of them over here, for him being a little bit of an exception, being recent months, the accusation towards this guy has been the fact that he bought subscribers, he bought views. So he's now having to sort of maybe do that to keep those views up. Maybe he's buying them. And I've done videos on this in detail around why we think this guy has bought views and bought subs, but it is what it is. I'm not going to go into the detail now. But Trike Card's another popular one over here. His biggest videos for him, again, a bit different, but mostly from the last couple of years. So it's one of those things where, like, when you see this, what do you interpret that as? I sort of see this as channels sort of struggling because that demand has gone, and I've seen that myself. It's common knowledge. I think Dustin, the sports card dad, actually responded to Professor Sports Card video today, and he sort of highlighted that in his own video as well. Like, we've sort of seen channels struggling, and he talks about, him sitting back there and thinking about his own channel. He's like, well, why am I not getting much views right now? And he sort of looks at similar channels within his niche, and he says, the proportion for their views is also the same. And then he talked about the fact that there was a big uptick now for the national, which is what we see year on year, but fundamentally views are down because that demand is gone. And, I completely resonate with that. You guys will see some of my recent videos. The algorithm, despises me at the moment. I've not really done all that well lately. Nobody's watching my stuff. If you are watching this, I really appreciate you. But it goes through ebbs and flows, right? That's what happens with content creation. It is, you go through the downside and then it'll pick back up again once you start getting pushed again. But fundamentally, things are down across the board. It's been painfully obvious. I've talked about it for a long time. I know Dustin has. Neo's actually talked about it in recent videos. So I think it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek when Professor Sports Card said no one was talking about it. But it's one of those things where, what do you interpret this as? When you see these views drop, what do you interpret that as? Is that demand going? And when you're seeing these guys move to different side hustles, what does that mean? And what does it mean for the wider industry? So anyway, I've repeated myself. I probably made no sense. It is what it is. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.